Here's a really important political story that crosses the virus story. It crosses 2020 election. It crosses the Democratic primary storyline, separation of powers. Really, a lot of stories are involved here. Democratic Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi is now calling for the country to vote by mail, period. Now, of course, with coronavirus raging and ravaging the country, as we now get into the phase of the pandemic where the daily death toll is staggering, there are more and more questions about what's the rest of the Democratic primary going to look like, but also what's the November election going to look like. A bunch of Democratic primaries have already been postponed because of the virus. Some states have already decided they are going to vote by mail, or rather, some states already vote by mail. Others are trying to figure out what can they do to get going in that direction. But eventually, we're going to get to the November general election. Now, I've received dozens and dozens of emails from people saying, is Trump going to try to postpone the election in November? Is Trump going to try to use the virus to stay in office indefinitely? Will it be safe to go out and vote in November? Won't the Trumpists who don't take the virus seriously go out and vote, whereas Democrats who are more likely to take the virus seriously will stay home, helping Donald Trump to get reelected? Well, of course, the answer is we should be able to vote by mail. And Nancy Pelosi is now saying that's exactly what should happen, which is going to become one of the biggest political fights since impeachment. Here is Nancy Pelosi saying it on MSNBC yesterday.
In terms of the elections, I think that we'll probably be moving to vote by mail. That's why we wanted to have more resources in this third bill that just was signed by the president to get those resources to the states to facilitate the reality of life. That we are going to have more vote by mail, and would hope that we would have also some funding, which was rejected, for the Postal Service, which will implement the vote by mail, as well as implementing right now, getting equipment to where it needs to be.
So that's very clear. She says we need to vote by mail. The problem is Republicans don't want this. Trump doesn't want this. Trump actually said this week vote by mail is one of the package of ideas that Democrats wanted in the stimulus bill that would hurt Republicans.
I will tell you this. If you look at before and after, the things they had in there were crazy. They had things, levels of voting that if you ever agreed to it, you'd never have a Republican elected in this country again. They had things in there about, election days and what you do and all sorts of clawbacks. And they had things that were just totally crazy and had nothing to do with workers that lost their jobs.
One of those crazy things that Democrats wanted in the bill that would make it so Republicans don't win is people voting by mail. They had things, levels of voting, that if you agreed to it, Republicans wouldn't win ever again, said Donald Trump. So they know that when more people vote, it's not good for Republicans. So let's talk about how this applies to the November election. We know Democrats are taking stay-at-home orders more seriously than Republicans. We know Democrats are taking the coronavirus more seriously than Republicans. If that continues, if the pandemic persists and you have to vote in person, more Democrats are going to stay home, and that will allow Trumpists to likely get Donald Trump reelected because they are more likely to be ignoring stay-at-home orders if they even have them in their states. So this is going to be a major fight. It's good that Nancy Pelosi is bringing this up. This should not be controversial. We've had absentee ballots for years. Absentee ballots are a form of vote by mail. Some people are able to do it because they can justify it. They're either going to be away, unable to vote in person for whatever other reason. We're talking just about expanding absentee voting to everyone. We have the system. They are going to argue, Republicans, that it's too short notice. We simply can't do it. We have the systems in place. States already have vote by mail in the sense of absentee ballots. We're simply saying allow everyone to get an absentee ballot. This is another reason why Trump wants to open things back up. If things are open, it's harder to justify vote by mail. If things remain closed because of the pandemic, if states are still under stay-at-home orders or sort of shutdown guidelines, it is more likely that Nancy Pelosi would be able to get her way on vote by mail. Would be actually a fantastic modernization of our election system to switch to 100% vote by mail. People don't need to go stand in line all bunched together, spending sometimes hours in line voting. vote by mail. It makes sense. Trump and Republicans know it's an existential threat for Trump's second term, so they will do everything they can to prevent it, but we should do it. We'll continue to cover this and other stories from today's show on the David Pakman Show Instagram page at David Pakman Show. While you're on Instagram, make sure you're following me for the latest coronavirus boredom updates on my Instagram page, david.pakman.